That's all green coal on that side.
This is all dust.
Yeah, I know. That's all, about all that was left in the whole forge when I started this morning.
Green coal will work.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Heart of Iowa phone co-op.
Okay, there you go. If you collect them, now you can use the short fire. I also have Logan International Harvester Chapter 5 here in Iowa. And out there in Mid-Island, Power Show out there to the jail complex. We all three going out there.
I don't know if we belong there.
Well, yeah, we pay our dues, but see now, according to that hammer is just about long enough for what I need to use, according to the article.
But it blows the theory that I had. All right, hang on that hammer where you're going to use it. Put the hammer in your hand where you're going to use it. Go ahead, Keith.
Oh,
Discussion on hammer size, huh?
right.
Go.
Okay. A hammer, according to this article, with the laws of physics and stuff, this is just an arm, an extension of your arm. According to the article here, it should be in the back of your elbow here and come out to the first joint of your middle finger, or plus or minus a little bit. It gets to use the entire leverage of your hammer. You have a mass out here swinging on a 12-inch arc. Some of the blacksmiths like to choke up on it. Now you only have about that much of your hammer working. So if you grasp at the end of the handle out here, you have mass times movement gives you a force. I mean, you can use a lighter hammer and do as much work if you grasp it out here. The longer your hammer is, though, the less control you may have over your hammer, where you want to strike at every time. So that's where you have to work and make it comfortable for you to do your work with. So you're not using, up here, you're using most of your arm to do the work, rather than the hammer doing the work. One fallacy is some guys will tell you you should have the thumb on the top of your hammer handle. That is the worst thing you can do, because what happens then, it has even by putting that thumb on that, all that force of that hammer comes up through your arm, and it'll go clear up to your shoulder. And you're going to hurt everything clear up your shoulder into your back. And use the force of the hammer, the length of the hammer, to do the work.
But the other theory is on hammers is to grasp it where you'd use it. You know, where you're gonna let the hammer do the work, and get rid of the rest of that. That's all wasted handle. A lot of people use their hammers like this, let it rock in their their hand instead of taking a blow on it. Let the hammer do the work.
That's, you'll have to read this, Phil, when you get a break here.
Put some stuff on the truck real quick.
And so, anyway.
Need some help?
We'll leave teeth on here.
Yeah, and when I was a little kid growing up, we were born and raised on a farm. And Dad would always teach me, he says, I was, just a little shaver, He says, boy, I'd always grab up here because I thought you grab up here. He says, no, you always grab at the end of the handle, and he says, let the hammer do the work, not your arm doing the work. You just want to use your arm to guide the hammer to do the work you need done. So, I learned that 60-some years ago,
Right now, we just got the fire built up and get some metal in the fire, getting it hot, so we can bring it to the anvil. That's the first process in anything involving blacksmithing is get it up to forging temperature, which light red is usually right around 1700 degrees, give or take. We work clear up to welding heat, which is approaching about 2000 degrees is approximately welding temperature for forge welding. So that all the way down then, when we get into hardening and tempering, we'll work clear down to about 300 or 400 degrees. But that's not actual forging. I'm going to put a point on this. That's how you put a point. You just keep working it, keeping it square, and you just working the point out until you got a fairly sharp point there. When we go back to the fire in the anvil is probably 90% of blacksmithing. It's one just about can't have one without the other.
It's hot, and then we'll rather come to work when it's cold. Huh? Right. Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to set out here, and I'm going to put a shoulder on this. There's all kinds of tools that you can make to go into a hardy hole, but there's a guy named Pete Ross. He's the blacksmith out at Colonial Williamsburg for years. And he says, yeah, a lot of that kind of stuff's nice, but you can do just about anything you want. Once you learn how, you can do just about anything you want on the edge of the anvil and the horn. That's because the Colonial blacksmith, he didn't have ways to weld up a lot of those fancy tools that we have, so they learned how to do it with just basically the anvil.
Yep, they have the hard times.
Pardon?
They have the hard times.
They They didn't have an easy life.
No,
They worked
and
really hard.
I was. It would be a whole different ball game if I had to make a living doing this 10, 12, 14 hours a day, working plow lathes and doing it like Matt Edel did. You want to edge your anvil that's fairly radius, because if you don't, then it'll actually cut in and create what they call a cold shut, and that's a place where it can start breaking. That's the beginning of a leaf. You can see where it's neck down. Now I'm going to start drawing this out. If people want to get involved in this is a pretty good place to come. It's pretty open. It's everybody here's learning. We've all been about the same place, and it's open. Just come on down and give it a shot. Now I'm going to use the reverse here to draw this out. Equipment-wise, the anvils are getting the toughest to find. They've gotten real expensive the last few years, and but you can make your own forge. Hammers, you can start with basically any kind of ball peen hammer or a cross peen. This is a cross peen. This is what they call a peen. A cross peen goes perpendicular with the handle. A straight peen is parallel with the handle. That's one style. This is a combination forging rounding hammer with a nicely domed head on it. This is about the same size as this one. Both these hammers were made by a guy in Minnesota who does a real nice job making hammers. You don't have to get that big a deal. You can just use whatever you got to get started. Okay, I don't need all this, so this is a cutoff hardy, and it goes in the square hole on the anvil. And like I was saying earlier, there's all kinds of things you can make to go in these holes. Guillotines, candle cup holders, candle cup makers, all kinds of, just whatever. You're only limited by your imagination. When you're cutting through this, you do not want to go all the way to the hammer, because that's hard on anvil face or hard on cutting tools, and it's awful hard on anvil or hammer faces. Now, what I've been doing, making this longer and thinner, that's called drawing out. That's one of the big. It doesn't look like it would be hard, but it's something that you get to keep it square, or when you want to bring it back to round. It just takes a little bit of practice. And it's nothing nobody can't learn. It's just part of learning this. If you look, you can see kind of sparklers coming up off of that fire. Looks like 4th of July sparklers. That you can see where that steel is actually molten on top. That's welding temperature. If you control that, you could have you wouldn't get it exactly that hot, but you could have welded at that temperature if you had things set up right. It's that right there is probably about 1,800 degrees. So it's an eye opener. If you touch it, you'll really know it. And I don't think there's a blacksmith around that hasn't found out about hot steel.
It can be what they call black heat too. It can be, looks just like a piece of steel, but it's still hot enough to burn the devil out of your fingers. Ain't it right?
Your helper was here today.
Well, they count. Did you say hi to Bill?
Okay, we're gonna keep drawing this out, and then we get it to a point where we'll take it to round. First, we want to draw this out to a halfway decent point. And at this point, you gotta be real careful. When you get stuff drawn out like this, you get a point like that, it don't take much at all, and you can burn it up like I was showing earlier. And that's usually where it happens, is you got your thing you're making almost done, and it burns up because you got talking and not paying attention. And everybody's done it. Okay, we just put veins in the leaf. Now I'm going to flatten this out here a little bit so we can put a punch hole in there, and we'll do that hot. This is a punch. It's made out of H13. It's a good hot working steel. It's a tool steel. Works real good for punches. we're gonna put a curl on it. Gary, you want to grab that water bucket there?
Yep.
I hammer this into a wood block because it won't distort the, I want to do this face down and the wood block won't distort my veins. And then you bring it back and straighten everything out so it'll sit right on the wall. Then we steel brush it. And while it's still a black heat, you can get this cleaned off, and I'll show you a little bit of a trick with a brass brush. You want to get as much of that slag off of there, that oxidizing of that slag. It's actually oxidized iron. If I can hold on to it. That brass, it comes off of there, depending on your brass brush, it comes off of there about black heat, probably 400 or 500 degrees, 600 degrees maybe. And it's just a patina. There's no depth to it at all. It's just like a paper. And that's what I started out with, a piece of 3/4. This tongs are hot. Started out with a piece of 1/2-inch square, and some hammering and a little bit of twisting, and it's one of the things that you can, I mean, it's just, blacksmithing's limited only by your imagination. And what else would you like to see? This is a mechanical hammer. This one happens to be a 25-pound little giant. There were several of them made. Most of them are from late 1800s, 1900s, early 1900s. They range all the way from 25-pound, which this one is, all the way up to, you get into some of the huge ones, the big industrial ones, and I don't know how big they went. If they're in a building like this, you can feel it up there when they boom, boom. So
we're gonna make a crowbar or a pry bar. We'll see how it goes. Starting out with 3/4 inch octagon stock. Came out of the combine drive shaft.
this is real blacksmithing.
So we drew it out, we'll put it back in the heat. We spark test this. It's high carbon steel. That's about as thin as I want to go. So we'll cut that on the Hardy tool straight off there. And then we'll put a bevel, maybe a slit down the center to get a nail out. We'll put a bend in it probably first before we slit it. see a lot of beginner blacksmiths work with longer pieces due to not having tongs available. Even though we've got a wide selection of tongs, this is what I'm used to working with. So with a hardy hole tool, cut off tool, you want to cut a little more than halfway. You don't want to finish your cut on the tool, because if your hammer hits it, you've just dulled it, and that's extra work to keep a nice sharp tool.
And also humor is
Yep.
Yep.
good thought. That's good thought.
But it's a really nice tool to have around to save an anvil from being all marked up from punching, cutting, working cold pieces. Mommy.
Nope, that's not my hair.
Huh? What's that? Yeah.
So I think for the angle, be able to pull a nail out and slide it in and get enough to get the leverage you need there on the nail. Not much of a bend, but just enough. So now we'll do a little bit of hot filing here,
Sister, man.
kind of as a chisel. Generally, when you hot file, you use a worn out Farrier file for horseshoes or horse feet. A new one tends to grab too much. A new one will work.
Yeah, see those sparks coming off of there? He's using that to remove metal, to put a bevel on that.
So we got a nice, sharp, blunt chisel, just in case you miss a nail. Hopefully it would dig into the wood to get a sunken nail out. Now we'll cool this off, or let it cool off. And we'll do the same down here and put a bend on it. That way you can finish your curl of getting it out. The nail, of course, that is. So, you got something you want to work on for a little bit?
Go for it. It's good blacksmith.
So that's kind of a problem for a beginner blacksmith, not having tongs or not having the appropriate stuff to cool this down. This being an unknown high carbon steel, you don't want to dunk it in water because it'll shock it. So pretty warm up here, so we'll try to stay down here. We'll go back to the power hammer, flatten this out, do all that, and we'll put our curve on it. Okay, coal fire, You have to watch for clinkers. I'll suck heat out. That's your slag and impurities in the coal. You'll notice over time you'll have to clean your fire. Sometimes you have to tear your whole fire apart, start over. Other times you can just find a little bit of a clinker, keep going, not have to shut the whole forge down. I was talking and burning steel. When you burn steel, you tend to get a lot more clinker in there.
You mean like a forming deal?
Yeah, forming. Or there's this.
That's gonna, I don't know if you want me to just kind of do that over the horn.
We can do that over the horn.
Cause I don't know if we got anything that,
I couldn't remember if I left one down here or not.
we got this thing, I don't know if that's gonna, I need to change that.
That's all right. You can turn it. Oh, we got
Yep,
it.
go for it.
Jenna. Shush. So do we need to hold the chisel now at more of a level plane for the anvil?
Yeah,
Get-
to get right down in there,
Yeah.
yeah, let me,
I'll let you adjust while I'm eating. It's the steel.
about like, something like that.
Yep. You're probably gonna slide off.
Okay, hold on. Okay, I wonder now maybe you got a pretty good lip there. Now we just come in here and just open it up.
Okay. Going for another heat right?
Or I maybe use this.
Want to use that?
Yeah, let's try this.
Alright.
We got both of them here. See what's working here.
And so knowing that I'm going to need a lot of heat for this next bend that I'm going to do, I'm adding coal now so that way it cokes out. And being in a building, we're not covered in smoke. So the coal fire, you really got to manage it.
Yeah, you were talking about that.
Let's see what this does.
Like that, so, okay.
Hopefully what he said.
he was working with a few pounds.
Yeah.
There was a couple of runs over anything else.
Let me put that down.
Get the same look.
Okay, let's try your.
That Francis Williams was about to come in there. Discount and it'll be as much food. Well, Perkins gives you the same, right, the same size. Some places will give you the small.
There's something I want to make.
I've got one of them at home.
Who was it? Some,
That were
Underhill do that, or Pete Ross do one of those? Something, so I saw some of them.
Suffolk Flats and Norfolk Flats, similar.
It's on my door in my basement going from the main room into the bathroom area.
I made the main part once, but I never just finished.
I had to. I've got some in there. There's donated to us.
If you ever used a crowbar, you always want to be able to make sure you got a nice flat surface to pound into the wood in both directions. I've seen them bent both ways. You know, the curve going the opposite way if you're 5 or 10 degree. Well, if your curve's the other way, this needs to be at a sharper angle. But, you know, when you're working, you jab your funny bone into there. It's just preference. Probably most people buying them don't look or cuss it until they've used it. But this is how I want my crowbar. So, and this being a tool, we'll put a little decoration on it if it doesn't work out. It's a tool, not a piece that someone's purchasing. I've never twisted octagon, so I think we might put a twist there in the center. Since we're not going to hammer right there, we wouldn't want to put a twist up here unless we didn't orient it right. So we'll put a twist somewhere here in the center, and that way if it ever goes missing or someone thinks it's theirs, I know this one's mine. Generally count flats, and you start with the flat side. So having the bent side down, I'm not going to have it hit me in my head. we'll try to get her back straight the best we can.
Go back below your
Go here, Bill.
yeah. Go kind of back where you were right there. Go high,
Okay. There you go. Oh, back in here.
Yeah.
So I need to let this cool down. Wait.
I think you get that hot back in there
Mm-hmm.
again, and I think you can tweak it in the vise there.
Okay. Jenna? What? Oh yeah? Yeah. Yep. See, it's straight up to that point, but I don't want to grab on those curves there and twist. Maybe if I grab a pair of tongs.
How about here?
Yeah,
Heat up this area right here
yeah.
and pull that towards you.
Okay. Here, thought I had these lined up. What'd you say?
Never mind. Made your hair like a beard.
Yeah. So here's our twist. We got it fairly straight. Little lock in her. But it's a good test piece. I'll remember every time I use this tool that I made it. Phil, Bill helped me make it. Keith has always helped me out too. So got some good teachers. And that's the nice thing about the blacksmithing community is that they're always willing to help out. Make sure that if you're willing to learn, they're able to help you learn. So.